for the most part, I don't disagree with the concept because I didn't know how the conversation was going to go. So I listened to, I watched the clip. Megyn Kelly is, I think, like, I don't like watching her show, but sometimes there are clips
there is stuff of value to be found there.
I think she's talented.
Yes.
I think that she did a great job because once she left Fox News, she had an NBC show. And that floundered.
Oh, yeah.
But she's done a great job recovering from Fox News and NBC, and she's killing it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And she had Victor Davis Hanson on.
Not familiar.
He's just like, he's kind of like an old school, like, conservative, like think tank type.
Sure.
He's got like 2 podcasts, but the podcasts kind of go where like a young guy just asks him questions and he answers and all that stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I believe he was like, I think this is what he said. I know for a fact that he said, you know, these aren't necessarily a bad idea, but the way that Trump should be attacking it is saying like, I don't want to do this, but we have to do this in order to kind of like, as Pete said, decouple, uncouple from China economically.
Yeah.
But since he's not using that kind of language, it's kind of making everyone seem like he's just being like a fucking recluse, which is the case because it is kind of recluse. You're playing chicken with the economy.
It's like for somebody like it's just so fast and loose.
Yeah.
Which is it's destabilizing.
Yeah. It absolutely is. And it puts a lot of people and their livelihoods in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And I feel for that because, as I said on the podcast, my mom's livelihood was in jeopardy over COVID.
Yeah. It's complicated. So, like, in the impetus of, like, tariffs, it's in, say, like, traditional flat to, like, the ad valorem ones to essentially to protect domestic industry in its most pure type form. We gave that industry away.
Yeah.
This is not. It's 100 years of failure that can't be fixed.
With a game of chicken.
With a game of chicken.
And also, I think this was the point that I was getting at before. It's like the time to do this is like, obviously you can use the Chinese proverb or whatever it's actually being. It's not actually not a Chinese proverb, but it's attributed as one.
Yeah.
The best time to do that. Best time to do it was like 100 years ago, and the best time to do second best time is now.
Yeah.
I think what Victor Davis Hanson was saying, the best time to have done this would be in the 70s and 80s when we knew China was utilizing sweatshops in Vietnam and Bangladesh and all this, that, and the other thing, and we should have used tariffs
the traditional thought that still sticks around is that like it is sweat labor, and that does exist in parts of the world, but now it's automated fucking nonsense. It's not even sweat labor anymore.
Yeah. But the overall point that I think he was making is that if we used the tariffs then on China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, all that stuff, it would have dealt with the quote unquote slave labor, sweatshop labor. And because there was a point I never even got a chance to raise it because I also just didn't want to drag it out.
Yeah.
Dave Smith was using the point that if cheap stuff is a negative impact on the economy, then free stuff would be even worse.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree because...
I don't know how I feel about that.
I disagree just because if China is making stuff that's cheap, then it sets the market.
Right.
And our market, then we can't compete.
No.
For all the reasons that Pete mentioned in the podcast, where it's just like, well, it moved. But also, even if we wanted to bring it here, there's an expectation that Americans have for what they can make and still live.
Yeah.
So, therefore, by extension, now China has, set the market so low that this job is no longer even capable of being brought back.
It's not
here.
even feasible.
So that does harm this market because now we can't make these T-shirts, beer koozies, things that aren't necessarily quote unquote trivial.
Yeah.
Like we could a lot of our stuff, that was a point that I was going to make, but I just let it go.
Yeah.
Pharmaceuticals are made in China.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like we need that here.
Yeah.
Because as I did point out on the podcast, all it takes is China to go,
that's it.
You're gone.
Yeah.
You're gone. You're done. We're cutting off.
And in a unilateral country like that, it can happen.
it can happen. And if they were like, all right, I think it was 2027, maybe it's 2030 or 2035, I forget the year. They're like, all right, one China policy, we're taking Taiwan.
Yep.
You're cut off.
Yeah.
Good luck fighting us.
Yeah.
So I see it in both sides. I feel for Pete and his business. I don't necessarily. I think tariffs are bad just because I would like free trade.
Right.
But also at the same time, they're a necessary tool.
They are a necessary tool, and it's unfortunate, but you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
Not where we are. I mean, you can all pretend the idealized world, whatever. It's just we have what we have.
Yeah. It's if we presuppose that any country is going to have our same labor policies, or even that we would have the same labor policies as some other countries that might have better labor policies, you're going to set the market. You're going to impact the market for someone else. Yeah. I don't necessarily blame countries like Canada and Europe and countries in Europe and all that stuff for having tariffs, but also at the same time, you should take into account how we feel because we effectively have been your bodyguard for years. It's not to say that Canada and Europe don't have militaries. It's not to say that they haven't helped us during military,
of course.
Like the war in Iraq, Afghanistan, this, that, and the other thing. But it is known, widely known, that most of NATO does not spend up to the minimum amount of their GDP for military spending. Yeah. And only a few countries have recently done that. Because,
you're exactly right. It's only been a recent thing.
Because Poland is worried about Russia and Greece is worried about Turkey.
Yep.
And I think there was one other country in there. I think there was only 3 countries that were spending.
If you asked me like a month or so ago, I probably would have been able to tell you what it was, but it's out of my head now.
Yeah. We need to have more nuance in our discussions because we don't. I can kind of think about stuff like I have my own biases, but I try to think of things objectively.
And I think that's the best you can do is try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like, all right, well, I don't necessarily agree with the tariff because I don't like having, additional taxes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also at the same time, it's like, well, if we don't do anything, then China can just decouple with us and we're fucked.
I think this is often where I get myself hung up is because like something has to be done. How do you do that with somebody gets affected one way or another? And it sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks.
It absolutely does suck. And a lot of innocent people, this is why like I had that somber tone during the podcast. Yeah. Because my heart goes out to the small businesses because my heart went out to the small business during COVID. Yeah. My heart went out to the small businesses during the Black Lives Matter, Antifa riots in Minnesota and all over the country. Like, it's pernicious. It's pernicious. That is the American dream. The American dream is that you can literally pull yourself up by your bootstraps, start a small business, and be successful. Yep. You don't have a boss.
Right.
And to a degree, not even to a degree, a lot of that was murdered during COVID. Yep. A lot of it was murdered during the 2008, recession as well.
Exactly, yeah.
No one was held accountable for those 2 injustices. Yep. And the only thing that I can think of for this is that the only good that can come out of this is that it's minimal damage and we lose some tariffs that were being placed on us.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best that you can hope for.
That's it.